All right, welcome back. What's up, Canada and beyond? It is Thursday, September 19th. Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, grannies and gators, we're doing something a little bit different this evening. My regular scheduled ranting, raving, and dissection of the Swamp Zombie universe has been preempted by something I think is far more significant and we're going to be doing a press conference today. I was a part of this press conference earlier this afternoon. It's going to be published all over Canada tomorrow. You guys will start to see a lot of what was talked about at this press conference today. But you guys are fortunate enough to get the early bird version of this. So I hope you are buckled in for a little bit of an extended version tonight. This will be 2 hours. You're going to hear from some experts. This is kind of a big deal, and I hope people come out of this with a far greater knowledge, understanding of the crisis that we're facing within the political spectrum, how critical these issues are, and I'll be here with everybody throughout this press conference. I'll be in the chat. I will do my best to answer whatever questions arise within the chat, but it will be open after the press conference for questions and answers, of which I'm sure there will be many. So, guys, you're going to be hearing from experts and people, not just in Canada, but from some of the best who are organizing, in fact, to do something about all of these issues, a couple in particular today. This is throughout this, I'm going to be posting some links across the bottom of the screen, like I usually do. Um, and on that note, if you're new here, thank you, welcome, glad to see you. Join our community. This isn't a show. We don't have an audience. We have a community, a family, and it is an international one and growing. So welcome. Make sure that you hit that subscribe button, get your notifications turned on, and if you're not new here, you'll know we need to share this collectively because nobody's going to make it easy to get to the information that undoes the crime sprees, right? So this is a community effort. This is a community platform. Everything that we cover here today, the uh, video version, all of the links, everything else will be included in the Substack tomorrow. I'll pull that up here just so people can get a look at it. Make sure to get subscribed to What's Up Canada. There is only one real What's Up Canada. Everything is free. There's no paywall. There's all kinds of extras in there. And if you can't remember the Substack URL, find us on whatsupcanada.org. There's going to be more announcements coming over the next few days, including what's going to be an international 24-hour event that has never been done before. You people, you folks, friends, family, patriots, hostages, are going to get to have a front row seat in this. Part of it was inspired by this community, and there's some good stuff coming. So, without further ado, we've got a bit of a long haul here in this tonight. Take notes if you want, ask questions if you want. I will be flashing other links across the bottom of the screen as we carry on through the show. Um, yeah, so let's get started with the press conference. We started just a couple of seconds in by the time the recorder started working.
Matters in particular. One is the advancement of these foreign hostile agendas in Canada in the form of Bill C-293. And the other is the current strategizing of the United Nations to make COVID look like a bit of a warm-up and to create many pathways to similar tyrannical unelected government globally. So with no further ado, Bonnie, I'd be grateful if you would introduce our experts, and if Ted, I would love to have a comment from you. And I look forward to all getting informed and having a discussion about this.
Thank you. Thank you. Good morning and welcome to World Council for Health Canada's urgent press conference regarding two very important and current threats to our rights and freedoms. Canada's Bill C-293 that recently had a second reading at the Senate September 17th, and the United Nations extensive power grab with the Summit of the Future scheduled for September 21st to 23rd. We are pleased to begin our event with two very well-respected lawyers and a star-studded gathering of main truth media such as yourselves. One world control in Canada and abroad is the theme for today's conference. Dr. Trozy and Ted Kuntz will be giving opening statements followed by our speaker presentations given by the following subject matter experts. Lisa Morin is a lawyer, journalist, and activist. Her work can be found at lawyerlisa.substack.com. She's speaking on Bill C-293, an act respecting pandemic prevention and preparedness. Shabnam Palessa Mohammed is a lawyer, journalist, and activist. Her work can be found on worldcouncilforhealth.org and wchsouthafrica.substack.com. She is speaking on the upcoming UN Summit for the Future. We will then open the floor for questions, and please do consider your lead up to be sure we have enough time for a robust discussion. Please know we are recording and the conference and it will be posted on World Council for Health Canada's Substack within 24 hours at wchcanada.news. You may also record and or live stream. We ask that you please share and encourage others to do so. We also invite you to contact us if you wish to be featured on World Council for Health Canada's platforms so Canadians know where they can find journalism they can trust. If you have any questions, please contact WCH-Canada at drtrozy.org. Blessings to all, and now to prayer. A prayer for Canada. We call out to you, dear God, the divine, all-powerful, one creator, to give us strength and guidance as we face the enemy of love and freedom. We do not fear the challenge before us, as we know you are watching and providing all that we need to stop the capture of our mind, body, and soul. May you remove the wicked and empower those who walk in your name. To quote those who walk before us, our liberty depends on the freedom of the press, and that cannot be limited without being lost. Thomas Jefferson. No one outside can rule us inwardly. When we know this, we become free. Buddha. Freedom is the right to tell people what they do not want to hear. George Orwell. Freedom is not a gift bestowed upon us by other men, but the right that belongs to us by the laws of God and nature. Benjamin Franklin. The secret of happiness is freedom. The secret of freedom is courage. Thucydides. We are thankful for your grace as we walk in your name through these dark times together. God bless Canada. God bless us all. Now I hand it over to Dr. Trozy and Ted Kuntz to officially open today's press conference.
Thanks very much, Bonnie. And I had an opportunity welcoming everyone in to make some opening comments. So I'd really like to thank lawyer Lisa Morin for being here as a real expert on the situation in Canada, and Shabnam Palessa Mohammed as an expert on what's going on with the UN and globally. So with great thanks to our experts, and I would love to hear from Ted Kuntz to move things forward.
Well, good morning, all. First of all, thank you for being here and helping to spread the word about Bill C-293. I have to admit that I'm probably like most Canadians. When I participated in this conversation last week, I was alarmed to hear that this bill has advanced through our parliament and is now sitting in the Senate. And when Lisa and Shabnam reviewed the contents of this bill, I personally see this as a significant existential threat to not only Canada as a country, but to our individual rights and freedoms as citizens in this country. It appears that the bill is purposely designed to be vague, to be broad, such that it impacts every aspect of our lives, from our water to our food to our land to our access to healthcare to our ability to travel, all under the guise of either an emergency pandemic or a climate change emergency. And what it does effectively is it delegates the responsibility and the authority from us as individuals and from our elected representatives in this country to unelected foreign entities that have an agenda that is completely at odds with individual rights and freedoms. As someone with Vaccine Choice Canada, we have been advocating for protecting the right to informed consent and medical choice for 42 years. And what I read in that C-293 document undermines, actually eliminates our ability to have freedom of medical choice and informed consent. The lack of acknowledgement in our media, the lack of acknowledgement in the Canadian public suggests that this is quite intentional, that they do not want us to participate in this decision. It's a decision that's being made for us under the radar. And I suggest that what we're facing is an existential threat. And I'm looking to all of you to help educate, awaken, and activate Canadians. We have to stand up to this threat, regardless of what the Senate decides in the coming days. I suggest that there's a force that we are being challenged by that will not go away. And the only way to defeat that force is we have to educate and activate Canadians to stand up and defend their rights and freedoms. So those are my opening thoughts. Thank you for being here.
Should I commence? Can everybody?
I think, forgive me, Laura Lisa.
Yeah.
Bonnie, were you gonna just, or Laura Lisa, a lot of people know who you are, but it would be good to have an introduction. And
Absolutely.
if we have a brief bio, that would be very much appreciated.
I'm a lawyer of 24 years. I have a Bachelor of Science in Environmental Science with a minor in Chemistry. I ran my own firm for 11 years. I took on large file litigation, including the Grandview, a residential school case that was run by the government, as well as the SARS case, the first SARS case, where I represented the family of Nelia La Rosa, the first nurse who died of SARS. I went in-house in the auto sectors and in tech and telecom. So I have a real broad experience. My master's of law is in conflicts of interest. And so I have a lot to draw upon in terms of my background. That's who I am. And the reason I started speaking out on Bill C-293 is I saw no one was, or at least not in sufficient capacity that the voice was being heard across Canada. And every time I think about Bill C-293, new discussion points come to the front. For instance, the One Health approach within the bill, when we get into it, you'll see is a totalitarian approach, in that it is the totality of possible governance. So it's a bill that has totalitarianism at its root. You know, it's a coup on Canada in that it extinguishes the roles of jurisdiction. There's an attempt with sustained collaboration of all governments to, work on jurisdictional issues. It can also be envisioned as perpetual or emergency powers. So being ruled under martial law at all times, because the risk of a pandemic is not defined, and you can only have to bring in the risk of something that could possibly contribute to a pandemic not defined. So, and then there's the omnipotent jurisdiction in so many of the provisions in that they attempt to govern Canadians and non-Canadians abroad, right? So it's evil in a lot of respects, but it's written with AI, I believe. It has a lot of nudging points that lead you to believe it is about the first rodeo. They'll mention things like availability of PPE. It's communism in that it allows for a command economy where the state controls the economy and stockpiles. So what we have is a way to analyze this bill in so many different directions, none of which are good for Canada. And it, for me, transcends the divides that we have been boxed into by identity politics of the Trudeau government. The Trudeau government seeks to separate us because together we are very powerful. And so in that sense, there is hope. I have seen such a continual desire to report on this and to hear and learn about this. People who have gone through our first rodeo, it doesn't sit right. Things are not sitting right. So without further ado, I would like to start sharing screen if I may.
Yes, please do. You should have share screen.
So we're talking about Bill 293. I am, however, going to back up and talk to you about the international health regulations of 2005. In 2022, I became very concerned about the WHO pandemic treaty and the international health regulations of 2000 amendments. But I had a hunch, having gone through the pandemic and seen what I call the public health mafiosos not act in our interest. It just seemed like very common sense was abandoned, whether it was shutting down the entire economy to protect marginalized populations, whether it was demonizing those who weren't vaccinated while having plenty of information about the dangers of the vaccines and plenty of information about the ineptitude of the product. So nothing felt right, and I decided I was going to find out what my hunch was, which was that public health mafiosos were connected to the WHO in a beyond advisory capacity. I looked at the 2005 international health regulations and hunted down, and I found this thing called the NFP, which are national focal points. What that essentially is since 2005, every country of the world has to designate what is their national focal point with the WHO. That is the control point. That is the satellite office. So for my subscribers, you can subscribe and find out where your satellite office of the WHO is. It is a very important list. And I have noticed periodically they do change slightly their links, which is an interesting thing to do periodically over time to make yourself less visible. And how many people, if they knew how closely connected our public health mafioso were to the WHO, would look at the lens behind us in our first rodeo and look at it in a different lens? And how many people, I should tell you, have to look at this for Bill 293, and it is a context point. Canada's NFP, or National Focal Point, where is it? 525 23rd Street, Northwest Washington, D.C. So our NFP, our satellite office of the WHO, is in Washington, D.C. at an organization called the Pan American Health Organization / WHO. So essentially, we have here this continual conflict of interest where our NFP is actually run by the WHO itself. And the health portfolio that it runs includes the following agencies. And you just put this in the context of monkeypox. You put this in the context of bird flu. You put this in the context of, pandemic. One, the Canadian Food Inspection Agency. So what are they going to do? They're very healthy. They are dedicated to safeguarding food, animals, and plants. They safeguard them, which enhances the health and well-being of the Canadian people, environment, and economy. So they're going to tell you if your flock has to go. They're going to tell you if your food has to be discarded and burned. The Canadian Institute of Health Research, Health Canada. Health Canada is one of two public health areas that are involved in this bill. So now you see they are very closely connected to the WHO. In fact, they're essentially, it looks like they are, it appears to be, and justice must be seen to be done. Until they prove otherwise, I'm entitled to assume they're being run out of the WHO PAHO office. So, globalization works like this. We collect our regional areas and like the EU or Pan-Africa or Pan-American, and then we just wrap it all up in a bow through the WHO and UN. So Health Canada, do they, the role that they have in advising doctors on how to deal with any disease, that comes out of the WHO. Did you think they were yours? Did you think doctors who are lining up with experts, did you think they were your Canadian experts? Did you? Given the Gavi funding of the WHO, the Bill and Melinda Gates funding, given the profit, given the CCP connection to Tedros, given the accusations of Tedros of horrific things to his people while he was part of the Tigray governing party. Patented Medicines Prices Review Board, what's getting approved, right? And what prices they're paying for them. That's an awful large conflict of interest for someone who has their thesis in conflict of interest, right? The WHO controlling all of this since 2005, embedding in all of this. This is a huge, huge disclosure in not only the health freedom community, but in the broader community in Canada. The Public Health Agency of Canada, right? Bingo. I thought I would find this. It's just a hunch. And I did. I wrote all the MPs disputing the WHO pandemic treaty and international health regulations. I got responses from only a handful, less than 5. One of them was the office of Nathaniel Erskine Smith. And I do not know if you can see this, but he is, let's see, who is the private member, Nathaniel Erskine Smith, who sponsored this bill. His office sent me a podcast of him telling me to watch it. It was on conspiracy theories. So he was gaslighting me on the WHO control while nationalizing that WHO control in a perpetual totalitarian coup in which he had already debated. In October, they had debated the first reading in June of 2022. So let that sink in. They are gaslighting us always. There is no way he wrote the text of this bill. Should let you know, I just found out last night that Ireland has a similar bill. New Zealand has a similar bill. This is an OECD country march, and I am sure, Shabnam, that in Africa you are seeing likely the same types of nationalization. So I call this their insurance mechanism. So if their totalitarian view is not able to be embedded at the UN and WHO level, they are doing it nationally. Now let's get into the bill. It's actually not that long, but you will be astounded at the breadth of what it covers. The first thing I want you to notice is the One Health approach. It's found 3 times in this bill. It does not mean that we'll all have the same health approach, or in fact, it does to a certain extent. But what is One Health as it's defined in this bill? Because this is a very important clue. It is totalitarianism. There's nothing left out. You tell me what's left out. a multi-sectoral, any sector that they want it to be, a multidisciplinary, any discipline they want it to be, collaborative approach, so they have to be working with others, that focuses on, it's how they, focus. They do not know what that word means, on the human, animal, plant, and ecosystem health. So if you can describe something in God's green earth that is outside of that description, I would love to do crossword puzzles with you. I cannot come up with something that is not in God's green earth, that isn't described here. That's totalitarianism. And then the welfare interface. So the welfare interface is the citizen, whoever you are, cyborg, alternative DNA individual, your relationship with your government or NGO. So there, what else is there? Is central. All of that is central to preventing the risk of future pandemics. Risk is not defined. How big of a risk, right? Pandemics, how much in the future, right? So, we never know when climate change is going to end our world. So, it's an ongoing risk in the future, right? Whether it's an ice age or an interglacial period, we always have to be worried. And because you will see that climate is part of this. And whereas, okay, this is also found in another spot, sustained collaboration among various ministers, all levels of government and Indigenous communities. And to my First Nations, I really want you to pay attention. On top of nothing being defined, Indigenous community is not defined. It literally can be what the CCP wanted to be, or what Bill Gates wanted to be, or whoever it is that is part of this one world control. I mean, this is not Nathaniel. Is Nathaniel running the world? But the omnipotent jurisdiction in here, you will see, does not come from a lowly Canadian. A Canadian is not thinking they get to run around and rule the world. That's what's in this bill. So the purpose is to prevent the risk and prepare for future pandemics. And it's so odd. This is the gaslighting. They want transparency and accountability. Great. Wish that were the truth. There's this bill needs to die. This bill needs to die. So they get to prepare a plan. Who are the individuals who prepare the plan? First, it's the Minister of Health. Okay. Remember that this person is our satellite office of the WHO, our NFP. The Minister of Health is embedded in PAHO and the WHO. Which way do the tentacles go? Since they never disclosed it to us, we can assume the tentacles go one way. And that's from, and we'll get lots of clues that it goes one way when we look at the types of provisions here. I'm going to flip down. Who else is part of the control? The amendment to the Department of Health Act is the last thing that this does. Okay, and who gets additional powers? So the Minister of Health is going to appoint a National Pandemic Prevention Preparedness Coordinator. So top-down approach, right? This is the new ruler. This is the new ruler. And then coming from the Public Health Agency of Canada. I get a lot of questions. Is that Tam? I think maybe it's Davila. Because she's no longer with Toronto Public Health. And delegate the coordinator the powers. Okay, so the Minister of Health gets to give powers, duties, and functions that the minister considers appropriate. So a black box of further powers not elucidated already and enumerated. Closes out with any duties, any powers that the minister considers appropriate. Wow, what a grant. You can't list what you want to do with this bill? It's a perpetual grant of power. So it's bypassing emergency act, right? It's a perpetual duties, anything that the WHO infiltrated Minister of Health and Public Health decides. Okay. Where else do I see? Oh, and the updated plan. Every 3 years, at least once every 3 years, they update the plan. So they ratchet. But they could do it every 2 weeks. right? Well, the way it's defined is that they, at least once every 3 years, a new plan will come through. When you see the contents possibly that they are actually discussing and the stuff they don't discuss by just giving broad grants of power and black boxes of power, you will fear these plans, and you should fear these plans. And you should, as a Canadian, stand up and say, no, I'm not granting the entire regulation of my life and my community to a WHO globalist who, clearly sees us as equivalent to a blade of grass. If you read their documents, this is how they see us. And here's your other black box of power. And that gives you a clue. This is where I call the treaty without a treaty mechanism. They get to have consultation with relevant ministers, a summary of key cooperative measures. Those cooperative measures are not defined. So what is a cooperative measure? Let me tell you, that could be a phone call. Hey, do we need tanks today? I mean, it could be anything. That could be a memo. A cooperative measure does not have to be disclosed to us. It does not have to be discussed or debated. Okay, and who do they get to have a cooperative measure with? Our WHO-controlled public health between the government of Canada, so itself, because they define themselves as the government, the pseudo government of Canada, other foreign governments, so any other government like the EU, key international organizations, so Gavi, SAPI, right? Anything, including the World Health Organization. Oh, so this is a continual black box of power, once again, outsourced to public health and the WHO, public health and anybody they want it to be, public health. And those cooperative measures, we don't know the contents of them. We don't know how frequently they're going to come. So it's a perpetual manner in which to govern Canadians in perpetuity. Right. And to give you a chance to understand how they are going after our food, because if you research any of these organizations, it is insect protein is for you and printing your meat is for you. And you can be a vegetarian or vegan, and I respect your choice, but imposing that on the world is very draconian and very totalitarian, right? The government is on your fork. So the United Nations Environment Program, the World Health Organization for Animal Health. And does someone want to speak? No? Okay. So
Hi, Lisa, just letting you know you got 1 minute left to wrap up.
Oh, I'm going to go over. I'm sorry. I'm just letting you know.
That's okay. Do go over some.
Yeah. This is important information that people have to understand, and this is a very thorough press release, and it's our opportunity to speak to the nation on important things. So it's not administrative that I'll be paying attention, but what I think our audience really is. So let's start. They get to describe the state of research. They do. So we saw where that led in the first pandemic. So they get to state what the research is. They get also to establish interlinking surveillance systems, right, for infectious disease in Canada and for infectious disease outside of Canada. So, this is important for Canadians who are already through Bill C-10, Bill C-11, surveilled. And here's the sustained collaboration between the Minister of Health and provincial governments and Indigenous communities to align approaches and address any jurisdictional challenges. That's very important from a legal perspective, because your jurisdictional challenges will be, hey, the province's jurisdiction under the Constitution for health and resources and agriculture, how is that affected? It's affected, right? So if you are saying, I'm going to have sustained collaboration with my provincial governments, are you then going to prevent those provincial governments from exercising their constitutional authority? Is this a further coup? How about the Indigenous communities? Because it's not First Nations, it's not defined Is that going to affect treaty mechanisms, right? Everyone's led to believe that the globalists love the indigenous. However, I'm not so sure that that is the case, and that they should really legally look into this. And what other jurisdiction? You have your charter and Bill of Rights. And if there is a jurisdiction that you might want, it's the jurisdiction of the court to rein in the legislative and executive branch. That's important. And so this is a very large clue that they know they're offside. They know they're offside. They're right there telling us, we're violating your Constitution. We're going to rule outside of the Constitution. We intend to do so, and we're going to infiltrate all levels of government to eliminate that jurisdictional challenge. So that's important. Okay, they develop the standards and guidelines. Okay, working conditions of essential workers across all sectors. You're nudged to think that might be your health workers. But however, it's not defined. What they get to define what is essential in all sectors. Working conditions may include your, working from home under a 15-minute city. And here's your command economy again. It's very communism. The availability and management of relevant stockpiles. Here's your nudging to the MPs that it's about PPE, including testing equipment and PPE. But since that's not defined, right, they get to say what's a stockpile. They get to manage it. They get to manage it for its availability or non-availability. I want you to think about that, Canada. Like, this is very broad. This is a communist management of our and look what Trudeau's doing with EVs, right? This is perpetual management. They get to own the communication of risk to the public. I may have said that. Here's your manufacturing capacity. Again, this is very communist. They get with any in Canada with respect to any product relevant to pandemic preparedness, since they defined what you have to do to be prepared, and they get to manage this manufacturing capacity in Canada. So that's the Ministry of Industry. Did people really think this was how they were going to stop a pandemic? By controlling every aspect of the Canadian economy, right? And the communication capacity and infrastructure. So owning our communication infrastructure, that is a massive, egregious way to control pandemics. In fact, this is a method only to control people. So do people think that all electronic platforms and tools should be controlled by the public health? Do they? And here's your Minister of Agriculture and Agri-Food.
Lisa,
We
need to transition now. Please.
I'm not done, and I'm going to complete this. I'm not done. Reduce the risk of antimicrobial resistance. We're talking about regulating activities that could contribute to a pandemic, including industrial animal agriculture. So that is very important for people to understand. They are going after our meat, and they get to promote commercial activities that reduce pandemic risk, including the production of alternative proteins. So right there, changing your diet, changing agriculture. And so that means Canadians have to know that preventing a pandemic is your government on the fork. It's an egregious area. In terms of the Minister of Environment, we need to change land use in Canada in order to prevent a pandemic. This is possible. Expropriation of rural communities, of people who don't live in sufficiently dense areas. This is people coming into the smart cities. Okay, in relation to disturbed habitats. We don't have time. I would take you to an article from the public T.H. Chan Public School of Health at Harvard that describes the leading cause of deforestation as agriculture. So they want to own the food through this. So changing land use in Canada, that's how we prevent a pandemic. And this has passed. This is an all hands on deck moment. Okay. And then here again, we're seeing your food. Phase out live animal markets. I've talked to the farmers and they say this is how they get their calves. This is how they get, their eggs, their chicks, and this is how they run agriculture. Again, so this is phasing out or regulating live animal markets. And then there's global health equity, which I want you to understand that this is spending all our money, so on non-GDP items, to run around and vaccinate other individuals who are not asking to be vaccinated, right? So, again, omnipotent jurisdiction. And here's global. There was one more global thing where we're going to take people off the land and to help global reforestation. So if deforestation is agriculture, reforestation is taking small agri-producers in Africa and everywhere else and hauling them off. What a mandate. What an omnipotent jurisdiction. So in conclusion, I've got to say, I think I've established, one, it's totalitarianism in that nothing is left out. Two, it's communism, and we're not a communist country. Three, they are straight declaring they are going after our Constitution and that jurisdictional provision. Four, it's a coup that creates an embeddedment with the WHO, which I've established by going to the WHO International Health Regulations 2005. And we have 5, I think, or 6. This is perpetual governance under the Emergency Act without the mechanisms of the Emergency Act. This is an all hands on deck, and I know it took a long time, but I think that the press release deserves the entirety of the discussion. Thank you.
Lawyer Lisa, thank you so much. And this is indeed all hands on deck. We're going to, I know a lot of us have thoughts on this, and there's going to be some robust Q&A. And first we're going to turn our eyes to, I think you described correctly, tentacles, Lawyer Lisa. Another tentacle, or perhaps the central body, from which the WHO came, or is an extension of the United Nations, and maneuvering there, working in parallel. And you mentioned it earlier, Lawyer Lisa, that how they work at multiple levels of government, infiltrated by, in my opinion, these are criminal issues. So we'd like to ask Shabnam Palasa Mohammed, founder WCH Africa, and the co-steering committee on the global team, to enlighten us on the parallel issue, the other line of attack from the, I guess, the central parasite class, the current actions at the UN.
Hello, everyone. Thank you very much for this opportunity to present today, and congratulations to WCH Canada for arranging this emergency press conference with some of the finalists, independent journalists our world, or the 99% have. So indeed, I'm an activist, journalist, and lawyer from South Africa. I serve together with Mark in the Steering Committee of World Council for Health and as coordinator of World Council for Health South Africa. I also serve within partner organizations, including Transformative Health Justice in South Africa and Children's Health Defense Africa. With that being said, let me also add that as way back as 2021, I remember spotting the WHO's pandemic treaty and seeing the red flags immediately, and hosted an event on it, which is available online. I subsequently invited people like Dr. Astrid Stickelberger to come and talk, and she highlighted the international health regulations. Of course, we've had a Stop the WHO and Exit the WHO, etc. campaigns ongoing since then. I have, however, turned my attention to the United Nations because I believe we have enough competent people on the WHO and because I see the UN as a far bigger threat to our health, freedom, and sovereignty than its agency, the WHO. With that being said, allow me to share a few slides with you. So my focus today, why the UN is a bigger threat than the WHO. And I want you to please bear in mind, it is not my intention to alarm you in any way, although the information is alarming. So at the outset, let's say, don't panic, organize. That's what we do. I also want to share a disclaimer that many years ago, I had this vision of becoming the Secretary General of the United Nations. Of course, we've realized a lot since then in this journey of taking back our power. So there are two core documents in relation to the WHO agenda that I want to highlight. The one is the Common Agenda, and it is a document written by the Secretary General of the UN, Antonio Guterres. The second is the Pact for the Future, which intends to be adopted at the upcoming Summit of the Future. Now, the Common Agenda focuses on different areas. And for each of those areas, there are policy briefs. And within those policy briefs is an area covering emergency preparedness, right? And under emergency preparedness is what I've been talking about every single day on every available platform. It is proposed that the General Assembly provide the Secretary General and the United Nations system with a standing authority to convene and operationalize automatically an emergency platform in the event of future complex global shocks of sufficient scale, severity, and reach. The Secretary General would decide when to convene an emergency platform in response to a complex global shock. You can understand why I've been highlighting this. The governments of Germany and Namibia have been overseeing the second document, the Pact for the Future, and there's various actions under that need to be discussed. But in the interest of time, I'm going to move on to talk more about that second document, the Pact for the Future. They highlight complex global shocks as events that have severely disruptive and adverse consequences for a significant proportion of countries and the global population, and that lead to impacts across multiple sectors, requiring a multi-dimensional, multi-stakeholder, and whole of government, whole of society response. Does that sound familiar? COVID-19. We request the Secretary General to present for the consideration of member state protocols for convening and operationalizing emergency platforms. And they talk about being flexible, but of course, that is just word salad. This is how most of us conceptualize the way the world works, right? Under national flags, and as to whether we're living in democracies or not is a subject for another time. This is how the world is really run. Policymakers at the top, including the Bank of International Settlements and central banks, the World Economic Forum, Council on Foreign Relations, Club of Rome, Chatham House, Rockefellers. Policy distributors, including the UN, IMF, World Bank, WHO, global corporations and NGOs, and of course, philanthropists. Policy enforcers, national governments and all of their subsidiaries, and selected scientific authorities. Policy propagandists, many, as you can see, including mainstream media and fact checkers, and policy subjects, us. I'm going to pause to remind you to watch these films that we made in South Africa called Countdown 2030 around the World Economic Forum. Very important, because they openly admit to penetrating the governments, including Canada's government. So any of your political leaders belong to the World Economic Forum, fire them. If you look at the United Nations website and you search for the term global governance, there are over 4,000 results. They're very serious about this. It means the erasure of individual civil liberties, the erasure of governments for what it's worth, democracies, and it would make politicians irrelevant. So I'd say they definitely need to be paying attention. The UN system is intended to operate along the principles of the rule of law. All persons, institutions, and entities are accountable to laws that are publicly promulgated, equally enforced, independently adjudicated, and consistent with international human rights norms and standards. There are no exceptions. And let's talk then about the states of emergency that were declared all around our world in all of our countries, which the UN was very much informed about. But what are the criteria before our countries can declare a state of emergency? If we look from a country perspective of the various human rights violations during COVID-19 from Brazil, India, China, Australia, South Africa, United Kingdom, Philippines, US, Myanmar, and Belarus, it was horrific. The World Council for Health drafted this document, which I'm very humbled to have contributed to, called Preventing the Abuse of Public Health Emergencies, or what are the lawful criteria to declare a state of emergency? This is incredibly important because the UN, remember, wants standing authority over emergencies. Before declaring a state of emergency, the onus is on the government to show that the public health crisis threatens the life of the nation. Big statement. And that this threat meets the following criteria. The threat must be 1, actual or imminent; 2, involve the whole nation; 3, place the continuation of the organized life of society at risk of extinction; and 4, be so extraordinary that ordinary measures for protecting public health and order are clearly inadequate. COVID-19 met none of these criteria. So all of our governments violated international law. We're operating within a mafia system. At the recent World Health Assembly, member states were threatened into going along with amendments to the IHR. We know this from inside information of member state delegates that I had engaged with, and I would encourage you to read this article. So silence procedure, public participation, all of it is meaningless. I had, as you see at the bottom, one of the member state delegates saying, I'm currently under technical surveillance and writing to you using VPN. So how else does this mafia operate? How many other reasons to not trust the UN? The sexual abuse of the women of the DRC by WHO and UN workers. And I encourage you to read that at childrenshealthdefense.co.za. Silence procedure. In September last year, the UN pushed through a political declaration on pandemics, the UN being a Trojan horse, realizing that the UN is under spotlight and our scrutiny and our resistance. There were 11 countries that broke the silence on this political declaration, and yet they were ignored. They declared this political declaration on pandemics anyway. 2 of those countries were from Africa. Again, the oligarchy operates in a mafia way. Public participation, one of my favorite subjects, and you will see Guterres highlighting it, and you'll see UN documents highlighting it. It's just word salad. It actually does not mean anything. Participatory approaches to decision-making and policy discussions. Civil society engagement doesn't exist. Prohibitive costs linked to participation, restrictions on gaining entry, increasing presence of government-organized NGOs, states using them to occupy some of the limited space for civil society, etc. I just want to pause here to draw to your attention that I am suddenly not feeling very well. So I may have to suddenly stop, and I apologize for that profusely. More information on civil society participation, standing authority we've talked about. So the emergencies that the UN wants standing authority over include pandemics, wars and nuclear events, accidental or deliberate release of biological agents, disruptions in the flow of goods, people, or finance, disruptions in cyberspace, cyber attack and critical infrastructure, a major event in outer space, unforeseen risks, technological developments gone rogue, and climate or environmental events, degradation or disaster. Coming up in the next couple of days, the UN Summit of the Future, where they intend to vote on a pact for the future and 2 annexes, a declaration on future generations and a global digital compact. What is the aim? Totalitarianism, exactly, and global governance. So declaration on future generations, I'm just going to say it's arrogant. You cannot be making declarations on people who've not been born yet. There's also something very interesting called the World Futures Council, launched 15 years ago. Global Digital Compact, and you can find it on the UN's webpage, Summit of the Future, consistently highlights misinformation and disinformation, and all of the actions they intend to take to stop that, including collaborating with governments and relevant stakeholders. Silence procedure we've talked about already. It's a complete sham. I would encourage you to read this article. Can the WHO and the UN impose sanctions for not obeying them? Short answer, yes. childrenshealthdefense.co.za. What can be done? Education, serving notices, such as the one I've drafted to the UN, lobbying, legal action, withdrawal, and strengthening sovereignty. Working at a grassroots level with the poor and marginalized, extremely important. Here's the notice I've drafted to the UN. Serve it on the UN, your government, and your government's representative to the UN. You'll find that on the World Council for Health South Africa Substack. Events, including the one we had last night, on the left, the UN's One World Government and the WHO's One Health Agenda. The UN and the WHO are holding a One Health Congress in Cape Town, South Africa, starting tomorrow, and it covers everything. And on the right, pickets that we're organizing as a response and learning more. So here's a course on understanding and addressing conflicts of interest, hosted by myself and my colleague, Fahri Hassan. More information available shortly. And of course, outreach, exposing the impacts of these bioweapon injections, in particular on children. Here's an old document. Should our countries belong to the UN? Let's continue discussing it. And a reminder, we are more powerful when we empower each other. Finally, our strategy should not only be to confront empire, but to lay siege to it, to deprive it of oxygen, to shame it, to mock it, with our art, our music, our literature, our stubbornness, our joy, our brilliance, our sheer relentlessness, and our ability to tell our own stories. Stories that are different from the ones we've been brainwashed to believe. The corporate revolution will collapse if we refuse to buy what they're selling, their ideas, their version of history, their wars, their weapons, their notion of inevitability, and I might add, their products. Remember this, we be many, they be few. They need us more than we need them. Another world is not only possible, she is on her way, and on a quiet day, I can hear her breathing. I'm going to stop there for now and close with the following. The power of the people is greater than people in power. Thank you very much.
Shabnam Palasa Mohammed, thank you so much. Friends, you can see why in this press conference we have two very important issues, and the word authoritarian, unelected global government, and as I suggested earlier, this is tyrannic or treasonous, forgive me, well, both. I want to, before we open up, we've got a great group of real journalists here to ask real questions and have some Q&A and discussion. I'd like to emphasize that on WCHcanada.news, you will find information and action you can take. And these were structured with experts, including Shabnam Palasa Mohammed and lawyer Lisa Moran. So you can take action on these items right away, folks. But I'd like to open the floor to more discussion. Perhaps we could utilize hand raising, and can I have everyone on my screen? And I'd like to open the floor. And please, each of our journalists and information shares, please give yourself a little introduction, because there may be people that haven't met you yet. So with great thanks, I'd like to open. And for starters, Patty of Vancouver, would you please ask your question?
Hi, can you hear me okay?
Yes, we can.
Great. So my question would be, who in the House of Commons is voting for this bill? Or who isn't?
So it's interesting. The breakdown of the vote is that the NDP voted with the Liberals on this. Now, what I see is the cover story on the NDP, because I've been forwarded some of the responses that people have gotten from writing their senators and MPs, is that they fought for the COVID-19 review provision in there. In my view, you could take that out and put that back, and take that out and put that back, and it would not materially change the grant of power, the totalitarianism, the perpetual emergency governance, and the black box of new provisions that could at any point enter, right? The powers aren't defined. So that's how it was broken down. Conservatives did not vote for it. And there were some good debates in terms of the Conservatives using the last pandemic in terms of, problems that they had, problems with mandates, etc. However, nobody brought this to the consciousness of Canadians until recently. And so it's the consciousness of Canadians really that has to rise to the top to push back. It's at the Senate. But MPs could always have this as a non-confidence, saying that we recall this bill. We recall this bill. We now understand how totalitarian it is, how it has an overt attack on the Constitution and the division of powers and separation of powers. MPs could do that. So they need to be pressured. MPPs could pressure the Premier to bring a constitutional challenge to this bill.
Thank you very much, Patty Vancouver, for your question, and expert lawyer Lisa for responding. Our next question, and may I ask of the journalists here, you might introduce yourself and your platform so people will know where to find your work as well, and or where to find your publication of this. Derek Noonan, please. Oh, you're muted, sir.
Oh, my apologies. Derek, I'm always a freedom fighter, but recently I've opened up my own media company as well that helps kind of relay these issues. I do a lot of humanist stories on my Facebook and X platforms, exposing what we're living under and presenting that to the public, in which our regular media doesn't. But I had really two quick questions for Laura Lisa. And I'm going to kind of read from the act itself, and just she can correct me if my interpretation is correct. And I'd go down to the very last portion of the bill, which is the amendment to the Department of Health Act. And 411, basically paraphrasing this, the health minister can basically appoint a coordinator among officials from the Public Health Agency of Canada, and delegate that coordinator the powers and duties and functions that the minister considers appropriate, which basically how I read that is basically a health czar that can't be questioned if he's approved by the health minister, in which his word would be final. And just one last question. Now, under the bill, each minister can be contacted, but I'm particularly concerned that they would be able to consult the transport minister for safety. Now, with regards to routes in which pathogens could lead to pandemics entering Canada, and summary of border-related measures that would be implemented to reduce risk. Now, I can also interpret that, and maybe Laura Lisa can correct me, just a hypothetical situation. The minister sees a contagion or a small contagion in Alberta beef. And under this, there's really no way to quantify it in terms of numbers, what that risk would be. In theory, he could basically shut the borders for Alberta beef, not to leave Canada or any nation, if I'm to assume that's correct.
So let's go to your first question. You talked about a health czar. This is a czar, you're right. And it mimics the pyramid structure of the WHO. So the pyramid structure of the WHO through to the NFPs with sustained collaboration. Then we get the czar at the top here, which is the public health dictator at the top. But you said he was a health czar that could not be questioned. He gets powers, he gets duties, he gets functions on an as-needed basis. So anything. And the grant of power is on the totalitarian view that it must be one health, which is every sector, every discipline, and everything in God's green earth, human, plant, animal, ecosystem, health, and the welfare interface. So this is a czar that can't be questioned on a new totality. Our first rodeo informs us that we, should be worried about what we went through with COVID. How I read this is, that was health mafiosos. What they're granting here is totalitarian mafioso. So we are expanding to land use policy expropriation. We are expanding, to new areas of what we're eating in order to prevent pandemics. So it's an oppressive totalitarian governance, and you're right, it can't be questioned. They have that provision on jurisdiction where they're outright saying we're attacking the Constitution. Now, your second one is what I call the Dr. Seuss provision. Oh, the ways the pandemic can come. Will it come by plane? Will it come by train? Will it come by any vessel? And so border measures in that provision are not defined. So we are always nudged into thinking the way they want us to. This is very nudging, so I've been researching this area on my Substack for over 2.5 years, and I have a book about to be launched. I know how to read these totalitarians. They nudge us to think it's the Canadian border, but you're right. Could be a provincial border, could be a community border, could be your 15-minute city border. When they choose not to define something, they give themselves omnipotent jurisdiction and any available interpretation. This is the least discussed important story of Canadians' lifetimes. I hope I answered your question.
Oh, you did, absolutely. So I am thinking down the right thought. I meant this is
100%.
100%. Who needs the Emergency Act when you can just be total dictatorship?
Correct. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Derek Noonan. Thank you again, expert Laura Lisa. Next, could we have a question from Wayne Peters of What's Up Canada? Thank you, sir.
Thanks, guys, for hosting this. Thank you, Shabnam and Lawyer Lisa, for such excellent presentations and efforts in attempting to bring awareness. My name is Wayne Peters. I run a platform called What's Up Canada. I've been a long-time disruptor and anti-globalist exposer. I don't really have an articulate a really deep question, but a couple of analysis points that I think will help set up the question. It's my firm belief and understanding that every metric of suffering facing the Western Hemisphere, at least over the last several decades, is at the behest of the WHO, United Nations, and these globalitarian organizations. And over the course of the last 5 years, exposing so many of the different tentacles as described of this encroachment and abuse upon not just Canada but the world. This bill is an abomination of wordplay being put to paper that encompasses every obtuse, arbitrary, obscure metric of control and management for the tokenization management of everything that they plan to govern Canada with. They want to know how many blades of grass in your yard, how many kernels of grain your chicken eats, how many pieces of bread you eat. And Canada has been lobbying the WHO. So this is a kind of a Canadian inflection on this, is the Canadian government has been lobbying for this level of obtuse totalitarianism in implementing this as the pandemic treaty. So this is the existential threat here in Canada, is that it is our own treasonous foreign infiltrated government that is responsible for this. And I think that this particular bill is the reason for the justification for all of the rest of the charade of the theatrics of elections, party, da 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 da. At the end of the day, all of the major parties in Canada are signed on to the Paris Accords, which this supports. So at this point, it's my firm understanding that this has already passed Parliament, and having passed another reading in the Senate, that having Trudeau having stacked the Senate makes this bill almost impossible for parliamentarians to deal with at this point, because it's already passed their level of authority. That without the court of public opinion, i.e. all of us, that there is almost going to be no way for this bill to be hindered or stopped. And this is the existential crisis in Canada, because if this is allowed to be to make its way through and set the precedent, Canada is the show pony for the New World Order, the Great Reset. So I guess my question is beyond this, the ability for the court of public opinion to engage and have impact on this, are there any other mechanisms whereby we can, through the courts or the judiciary, nationally or internationally, seek an injunction or any other methodology to get in front of this? Because the public, in my opinion, has been 100% blindsided on this. A lot of very informed people were not even aware of this until it was already in the Senate, which already makes the Parliament culpable to this, and why they are so busy distracting from their own culpability. And then this lends to the entire case of moving to election with 7 confirmed foreign infiltrators in our government without having looked at anybody that's put through these bills that serves the WEF, the United Nations, all of these foreign unelected entities. If that same lens of attention was applied not just to those 11, but to everybody that is signed on the dotted line of these bills, this is the problem that Canada faces, and this is the existential threat, and this is the reason to get this bill through, that they are committing all of these other acts of crime against our country. So I guess the question is there other mechanisms or machinations that we can engage upon further than just a court of public opinion? Thank you.
Okay, I think that was a great question. One of the things I think it would be useful is Shabnam had some great slides, and one of the ones on how the control mechanisms are at the top with the BIS, and I would love to have that, Shabnam, if you can post your slides. They were so informative. As to the remedies, so you're right. The court of public opinion can move people. It can move people in ways that we forget. We forget that we're all human. We forget that spies, agents have, been flipping sides since the Cold War and from the dawn of time. And it is a matter of connecting with people's humanity. And so, irrespective of Trudeau stacking the court, he does not own the good Lord, and he does not own what speaks to people inside them and what their response to humanity. It is one thing to not understand and pass this. It is another thing to get the voices of Canadians and the voices of experts on what this totalitarian vision is and pass this. So to say at the Senate, you know what? They put fences around that Senate. They put fences around that Senate. On one day, they got 42,000 emails from our one-click letter that we send out. People from diverse communities are stepping up and saying, this doesn't pass muster. So the court of public opinion is the first remedy. And in Toronto recently, they were going, public health, Davila wanted to decriminalize all hard drugs, including in schools, right? Lower age limits, so your 6-year-old could do meth at school with a safe pipe and safe supply. And they wanted to decriminalize it with no upper amount, so your 10-year-old could be a trafficker and you wouldn't have any remedy. And the court of public opinion said no. And so I'm at the point where I have confidence in Canadians that do not want to outsource their brain anymore to people to think for themselves, right? People who think for them. I can think for myself. Thank you. I have my 5 senses, and I have logic at my disposal and the ability to do research like anybody else. So that court of public opinion, I believe in it, and I think we're ready for it. The second remedy, of course, is the MPPs. Your influence with your MPP, you lay in there, because premiers, their constitutional authority, they can right now run to court and defeat this bill. right? They can. So your premiers can. And that's why the letters on our one click go to your MPPs. And our MPs have to start voicing what is going on with all of these bills and how they are connected. That interlinking surveillance in here, well, that works with Bill 10 and Bill C10, Bill C11. So there are remedies, and we have to have a legal team. We have to have a legal team to consider going to court on this in a novel fashion. Can you have a contract for suicide, right, held up? A contract for murder held up in court? No, you can't, right? It's immoral. So if this is literally a suicide of Canada in letters and in print passed, should it not be void ab initio, and should not the voices of Canadians be able to take it to court? And so we need a legal team. It's quite possible we need a legal team if the court of public opinion, but I don't think we stop, because I don't think you can comply with tyranny. What I see is tyranny in letters. This spells tyranny, perpetual, boot on our neck. And I don't think that silence right now, because of DEI, because of ESG, because of the control matrix of professional bodies, because of what your parents think or your siblings think or your coworkers think, it doesn't matter anymore. It's time to bring up our voices. And the other thing is, I think we have to broaden how we describe it, because our medical and our freedom movements focus on one aspect of that tyranny that we are well aware of. But the messaging now has to go, hey, well, how does land expropriation actually help prevent pandemics? Do Canadians know we're talking about changing land use policies? How does owning a communication structure, unless it's perpetual censorship? If you have to, and on Bill 63, if you have to imprison who it is you're having an argument with, your argument stinks.
Well, thank you very much. Again.
Oh yeah, I get a little mad.
We appreciate that. I think anyone who isn't angry has not been paying attention. So thank you very much, Wayne Peters and Lawyer Lisa Moran. If we could now ask Jody Ledgerwood of TFM Report.
May I just comment?
Yes.
Dr. Twazi.
Shabnam plus Mohammed, please comment before next question from Jody.
Thank you, Jody. I hope that's okay. Sure. Okay. All right. So the first thing I want to say is very clearly the globalist agenda is operating both at a national level and the international level. So we can see nationally what's happening. For example, in South Africa, amendments to our international health regulations would give the government the authority to medically kidnap people and quarantine them and force treatments on them and refuse them to see their families. And this could be for an unlimited period. And I have interviewed fellow lawyers on this subject because it's happening in tandem, this medical kidnapping, these bills. New York State, can't remember the lawyer's name right now, Bobby Hancock.
Yes, that's right.
I think
so we have this happening at a...
excuse me, Shabnam plus Mama. Your internet froze for about 10 seconds. If you could just back up to when you're mentioning Bobby and...
Thanks, Mark. Thank you so much. So yes, I've interviewed our fellow lawyers, Bobby Ann Cox from New York State and Sabelo Sibanda from South Africa, on the fact that there are these attempts to introduce these bills that can forcibly quarantine people, etc. Similar and parallel to that is the UN WHO agenda. So one way or another, because our politicians, so what you might hear me say very often is that politicians are the managing agents of the parasite class. By virtue of the fact that our politicians are largely captured through the carrot or the stick, and apologies to those to whom the hat doesn't fit, don't worry about it. One way or another, they intend to achieve their objectives of global governance. And we are what they regard as the useless eaters. So I was going through a little bit of a health crisis earlier on. I've recovered. I just want to emphasize this slide again. Think about these emergencies as defined by the UN and its funders, which include the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation and MasterCard. How many of these have happened, are happening, or are about to happen? When you connect the dots, you would realize much of the chaos we're seeing happening around the world has to happen for the UN to say, clearly your government can't cope, and so therefore we need to step in and establish formally the one world government as part of our new world order. And this includes the various forms of wars and conflicts that we're seeing around the world. Since the inception of the United Nations, the world has never known peace. You look at its origins, what did it come out of? Look at the fact that we have no seat at the table. And so therefore, it is of critical importance for us to build peace with each other as people, as communities, as countries, and as nations, and as continents, which were all one many, many years ago. Second point I want to make, and please do continue looking at these, because they're going to make these things happen. They're going to make them happen. And the world needs to understand the criteria that I talked about earlier. Know these backwards, translate them, make them available in every community so that when your government says, got an emergency, we've got to declare a state of emergency, you can push back and say, have you met the international law criteria? If not, bugger off. You can take that to court. We've done that in South Africa. The third point, and I'll close here, is to say that most recent discussions at the UN are around giving Africa 2 seats at the table without the Security Council table, without veto power. So essentially, okay, you can sit at the table with us, but shut up. Don't say anything. We don't want to hear anything from you. So I am hoping and will be agitating for African nations to say, hell no. Why does the Security Council exist anyway? There's this pyramid, right? So there's top tier of Security Council, and then there's the rest of us. How can such a system work? It's an exercise in futility. It's a theater of the absurd. And so we need to mobilize at a grassroots level. One of my favorite things is to talk to taxi drivers and domestic helpers and gardeners and academics and professors and anyone to say, well, what are you going to do when they announce the next lockdown? Because vaccines are contentious, but lockdowns, does anyone want them to come back? And then you can educate them, build up to taking back our power. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Shobna. Our next question comes from Jody Ledgerwood of the TFM report. Thanks, Jody.
Thank you, Dr. Mark-Trozzi. So this question could be aimed at either one of our presenters today. We know that the bill talks about surveillance and data sharing. And I was curious to know if either one of you understand how far-reaching that is, the surveillance and the data sharing. Is it going to go beyond our municipal borders, our provincial borders, our federal borders, or is it going to go on internationally? Therefore, Germany has access to my medical records. When I travel to Germany, they're now sharing my surveillance activities with the Canadian government. Do we know yet if it is going to be far-reaching? And capacity buildings, are they going to be instituted in every country? And will every country have the authority now to place me possibly in a capacity building, aka quarantine center, should they disagree with one of my activities that they have surveilled, or possibly one of my health issues that they were readily available to through their data sharing organizations?
There's a large response that goes into this. Yeah, first there's the smart city, right? There's the smart city. We are becoming known online, and we are becoming known in the real world, in real time, with cameras dripping from all our street lights. And I can do a very thorough presentation on the advancement of the smart city itself. The second thing is the concept of people as data. and as points of data. There's an organization out of the EU, TEHDAS, which is horrific because it scrambles as deaths. And it talks about the methodology to break individuals down into their data components. And so it's the idea that absolutely every transaction in the welfare interface, ecosystem, plant health, human, that whole totalitarian, multi-sectorial, multidisciplinary view has a code and an identifier. And that enables an AI administration of a social credit system. It's a very broad and international view. Now, in my forthcoming book on professional, I have quotes of President Xi, whose goal is to be able to charge an individual in any location on Earth, for whatever transgressions are coming about. And so, yes, it has a goal to be international. I am going to share screen, and it's because I want you to see, I hope you can see here, it's the OECD. And the OECD since 2016 and prior has been instrumental on creating a health data governance for the digital age and implementing the OECD recommendation. So between the OECD and their goals, okay, in order to manage the healthcare system without doctors, without face-to-face healthcare. When I see the doctors lining up for compliance with their professional bodies, I see what is going on is that they are enabling the future of AI healthcare while they stand down and do not stand up for health freedom, and they are actually making themselves the dodo bird. Because when you look into actually what is going on in data governance, is that they intend, and I hope I can get all the way down here on my viewpoint here, gets the next steps. There is I would love to be able to show you. They consider health as the 9 sectoral data spaces. So health is no longer, your state. It is a data set. And if you're dead, it's a different data set. And you lost a leg, that's a different data set. And if you're in a satanic viewpoint where you're the equivalent of a blade of grass, well, when someone mows along, no one's worried, right? So if you are just a summary of data in a system of data, does this sound like Windows operating system for the world? Maybe. And I'm going to just try to get to the first spot on this OECD. Right, here it is. This is a table, okay? The intent of the OECD on health data governance in the digital age is that there are variables that they want to implement in each country. So is that democracy, right? And then they rate where we are on this data governance scheme to implement AI healthcare. So at the time this was done, Canada was at 85% on key national healthcare data set available. And so you can look and see we are going in the direction where people are merely data. We are data for regulation. And all of the bills, whether it's watching us, are working in an omnipotent jurisdiction. And so, yes, you're going to see that this is a global governance system. And in the TATA's documents, I see that freedom is defined differently. So you have a notion of freedom, and words are the way, and I'm a wordsmith, I'm a poet, I've done stand-up poetry slams, I've done songs. So words really matter to me. And so I cue into them very easily. So freedoms for them, this is a notion. They're being redefined as freedom of movement of goods, freedom of movement of capital, freedom of movement of data. right? So that you're right. It's an international data set. And freedom of movement of labor, right? So you get to move if your data set says you can move, right? And then when you look, what are our growth industries in health? Euthanasia, massive growth industry, biggest growth industry. Sterilization, including sterilization of minors. Full-term abortion, perinatal abortion. What's our messaging? Save the climate by not having kids, right? We're going to a very dark area where this totalitarianism enables data to be the ultimate arbiter. And in TEDS documents, you don't even have as a last resort face-to-face healthcare. So doctors and medicine as we know it and the medical collapse of the system that we are seeing, in my view, is almost the intended result. And we have to unearth this, demystify it, and say, which world are we going to choose? Right? Are we going to choose where we, as humans, believe in humanity? Or are we going to have this dehumanized view where, we're controlled and someone's view of us is no better than cattle to be culled? And I think, that's where we're at. We cannot comply ourselves out of this. And the court of public opinion, we have to demystify it. We have to demystify the smart city. We have to demystify data as governance for us. And I hope that terrible response about where we're headed answers your question.
Oh, thank you very
Dr.
much.
Chandy-
Shabnam, would you be so kind as to comment on that also?
Yeah,
on
please.
Jody's
Thank you so
question.
much. I apologize. I need to go very quickly, but I want to tap into, again, drawing the relevance to the UN's digital compact. Remember, it's part of the Pact for the Future that they're discussing without us in the next couple of days. Let's look at the item on digital trust and safety. It starts off great. We must urgently counter and address all forms of violence, including sexual and gender-based violence. Then they talk about which occurs through or is amplified by use of technology, all forms of hate speech and discrimination, and they go to mis- and disinformation as defined by them. The next section, information integrity, item 32. Access to relevant, reliable, and accurate information and knowledge is essential. Defined by whom? We recognize that digital and emerging technologies can facilitate the manipulation and interference of information. Anyone remember Mark Zuckerberg talking about how the US government told him how to run Meta in ways that are harmful to societies and individuals? The attainment of the SDGs. Item 33, we will work together to promote information integrity, tolerance, and respect in the digital space, as well as to protect the integrity of democratic processes. In other words, election rigging. We will strengthen international cooperation to address the challenge of mis- and disinformation. They're doing it already, right? What they want to strengthen international cooperation on that. If you say something in Canada, you can be arrested in South Africa, and mitigate the risks of information manipulation in a manner consistent with international law. And almost at the end, it continues, item 34, we commit by 2030 to design and roll out digital media and information literacy curricula to ensure that all users have the skills and knowledge to safely and critically interact with content and information providers, and again, against the harmful impacts of mis- and disinformation. SDG number 4. Promote diverse and resilient information ecosystems, supporting journalists and media workers. Who are these journalists and media workers? C, provide, protect, and facilitate access to the dissemination of an independent, fact-based, timely and targeted, clear, accessible, multilingual, and science-based information. Why? To counter mis- and disinformation. Back to the SDGs. And D, promote access to relevant, reliable, and accurate information in crisis situations, such as the 10 I highlighted earlier that they want standing authority over, the UN that is, to protect and empower people in vulnerable positions. So they will determine what information is shared with the public on those 10 alleged emergencies. And finally, paragraph E, promote evidence gathering by UN entities in collaboration with governments and relevant stakeholders, right? So the philanthropists, the corporate colonialists, on the impact of mis and disinformation on the achievement of the SDGs. It's about to get very, very serious, but I think they have completely underestimated our passion, our determination, our resilience, and our faith that we can build a better world for the 99%. Thank you so much.
No, thank you very much, Shabnam Bless Mohammed, or Lisa, and Jody Ledgerwood of TFM Report for that exchange. Could we call on Shadow Davis to comment and question? Thanks for joining us, Shadow.
Thank you, Mark. And I just want to let all of you guys know that it's such a blessing to be able to hear somebody other than myself speak about it. I'm getting kind of tired of hearing the sound of my own voice. So thank you for putting this together. You guys have all obviously done deep dives. By the way, Derek, great job with that press conference a couple of months ago in Ottawa. That was fantastic.
Thank you very much. Unfortunately, they won't let me in again, but I'm working on that. So.
You see, now this is my question. You guys have all done deep dives on this, and this is stuff, unfortunately, I've heard before. We all here, I believe, know what is going on in our country, in the world, and how they're trying to divvy us up and tag us all with the smart cities and whatnot. My question is, how on earth are we going to get this message? Because it is convoluted and it is lengthy, and most people haven't got the attention spans for this. I mean, many of us try nightly or weekly or whenever the frequency of our show is to get this information out to people in the most concise and understandable way possible. But what we need, I believe, is a marketing department to come up with catchy slogans to get this information out to the normies, to get their attention away from NFL football on Sundays or whatever new movie came out, or whoever Kim Kardashian is sleeping with. I mean, seriously, we've got a problem here and we need to get more and more people involved. We've got a smart city situation going on in Winnipeg right now, just like every other municipality across the country. But for some reason, Winnipeg has woken up to this, which surprised the hell out of me, because this city has been sleeping for the past 3 years. But when people started saying, you're going to threaten my land, I don't think so. Then they started to wake up and they started to get together. I saw, I think, Lisa, you were at the rally yesterday at Queen's Park. I'm not sure how many people were there, but you know, we're talking about a bill here that's going to change the very fabric of our country if we let it pass. This could be the hill that we all need to die on. And a rally like that gets, what, 50 people to come out. We need to be able to market this. Do we have any ideas on how we can take, like, you know, Lisa, I heard you talking and everything you say makes sense, but it takes such a long time to get that message out to people because there is so much information there. How on earth do we capsulize all of this and get this out in bite-sized pieces so people understand what the hell is going on?
If I could just step in for one moment, briefly, and I'm going to actually share my screen. If I may, forgive me for a brief pause to do that. Can you all see the screen here?
Yep.
Mm-hmm. So this is WCHCanada.news, and here that's pretty much the full article on it. So an effort has been made to condense it, and now here we have the cross-pollinating group of trusted real media, as I would describe them, as opposed to dinosaur media. You guys here with us today to disseminate this, and then within this, really working on excellent work that was already done. And this is standforhealthfreedom.com. Another great asset we have in Canada. And you can see they've got this down to a very condensed message and very easy to take action. So whether one goes to standforhealthfreedom.com or WCHCanada.news, you're going to get something concise. And then, you know, Shadow and the others here, you yourselves are wordsmiths. And what I think is that the combination of your many platforms. And that's why we're coming forward to have press conferences like this with real media, that this is the sort of the growing church and the other is shrinking because of just how, it's become a propaganda machine. So that's my first offering. And then I'd love to turn the mic over to Lisa, who was ready to comment on this also.
Okay, so I have a vision that we create ambassadors of action. Okay, the idea is that all of Canada can be described as a grid. All of Canada is a grid in terms of, real estate agents, mortgage brokers. Well, they might be interested in the land grab, right? Or retirees. So we get them through CARP or Zoomer Radio, right? And we decide and we break down all of Canada. The auto sector, well, really, that's going to be affected. So is it dealerships? And we appoint an ambassador of action who is educated because they've seen this particular press release. And they've gone through the links and the documents. And they are appointed and they have a short amount of time for a turnaround to locate who it is who is as high as they can get in that industry. So restaurateurs, hotel and food administrators, right? People perhaps who create conferences. They have a huge list.
Presidents of the associations of these restaurants and auto dealers and all of that stuff, because these people have the pipeline right down to all of the GMs.
Bingo, right? Because I think we, my thrust is our medical freedom community really understands already. They are the red pill version of Canadians. They are the reddest pilled version of Canadians. They might be white pilled. And we have a large freedom community outside of the medical freedom community, and they're fairly educated. But this is something where you're saying, my entire communication infrastructure that we're going to have a command economy. The command economy from Trudeau already sucks. Are you kidding me? Are you kidding me? Right? So the everyday average Joe who really has put up a wall in their head about medical freedom. Like I know who they are. I see that wall. If you try to push another lockdown on them, they're going to stand up. Right? But by then it's too late. So the medical freedom is not the easiest way to wake people up because we've had 4 years to try to do it, and it's very insular and it's very difficult. And it's people with adverse reactions who are honest about what those adverse reactions are. I have a ton of family members with adverse reactions that are not honest to themselves, right? So I actually love that the medical freedom community is leading this. But this is an all Canadian. When people talk about our land use policies, right? That's different. When we talk about a command economy, that's different. And so that is your selling points.
Well, I'll tell you something before you continue, that when you just said command economy to me, I'm going, what the freak are you talking about? Right? And we're talking about average normie people that we need to be able to get them to understand what's going on. If you say that phrase to them, they're going to go, I don't know what the hell you're talking about. And then they completely and totally lose interest. We've seen this before. So what is the thing that's going to get, and there's got to be one, maybe two things that we can key on that is going to get these people. And again, remember, the first and most important thing to them right now is their NFL team winning or losing this weekend, because they've got money riding on it, on their whatever lottery they're playing. So how do we get their attention diverted from that and make them understand that a group of government thugs could come knocking on their door tomorrow and saying, by the way, we're taking half your front yard and we're going to turn it into a shelter for these asylum seekers who have just arrived yesterday? Because that's ultimately what we've got going on here.
What we need is actually to do it like a marketing team, which is to take some millennials, right? Some LGB friends, some, union types, especially teachers, because they're really, they're really cued into the union messaging, the QP messaging that they get all the time. and take a snapshot of society and have them go through this presentation. And then we take a questionnaire and say, what are the elements that you were most concerned about? And maybe even like aspects of our new immigrants, right? Because our new immigrants, we discount that they will be part of the fray, but many of them are the ones that stood up against the medical tyranny. Because, my friends from Slovakia, they told me, none of us, we knew not to trust the government. None of us took it. We all refused it, right? Same with friends from Romania, same with friends from Cuba. So, you have this idea that we're discounting our new immigrants too. And they're here now, for better or for worse. This is their future too. And they need to know that they're not moving to the land of plenty, that they're moving to the land of totalitarianism. So I think we take that broad section of society and do a questionnaire. What spoke to you? What made you want to stand up? What would you like to hear in terms of messaging? And would you now go to your groups and tell them about it?
I agree. And we need to boil it down to slogans almost. And I know how that sounds. When we see Pierre Poilievre stand up in the House of Commons, we're going to axe the tax. We're going to blah, 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 the crime. We're going to do, right? I mean, we get sick and tired of hearing that stuff. We get sick and tired of hearing we're all in this together. But how bloody effective was all that stuff? When they first started this pandemic, they hit us with the biggest marketing blitz the world has ever seen. That's what this was. This is nothing but marketing, to the point where even today, we're still seeing people walking around with those stupid face diapers on, right? They're scared, they're petrified. So, and I hate to say this, maybe we need to hit people with a fear campaign of our own. And the fear campaign is they're taking your land. They're tagging you like a deer. Quite literally.
One thing that I've been saying that has resonated is I think this is our Berlin Wall. We need to take it down. And so that develops the entire national consciousness of what is a Berlin Wall. So there's that.
Yeah, I mean, maybe we need to go to marketing professionals or something, because what we need is a unified message here. As bad as that sounds, because we're all independent media. Like, I see Wayne's face right now and he's going, Shadow, come on. But I'm saying that we all need to be speaking the same language here on this, if in fact this is the hill that we're going to die on. Keeping in mind that other people think that it's the trans, many people think it's the climate change stuff, and they don't even understand that it's all tied in together to the same central AI mind. Anyway, I'm done. Thanks, you guys, for having us all together like this.
Well, thank you so much, Shadow and Lisa.
Someone put a good comment there. They don't care about humans or children. They cater to their pets. That's really interesting.
Well, what did Trump say the other day during the debate? They're eating the pets in Springfield, Ohio. That got a lot of people's attention, and that has still been talked about today. You see that on social media now. There's memes all over the place, right? So what we need, and this may sound too simple, is some kind of a catchy slogan, right? Without saying tyranny or totalitarianism and all that, because when we start saying that, people go, oh yeah, whatever, conspiracy theorist. And what exactly, how at this point right now, what makes them go, conspiracy theorist? How long do we have to speak to them? I'm not even sure if it's a 30-second elevator speech any longer. Like, what is their tolerance for hearing words like that? So how do we get them in a different way? Pets, their land, whatever. I think this is something we all need to think about, and maybe even engage some marketing professionals who could help. And maybe we just stumble across something one day when we're walking down the street and go, oh my God, because the simplest is the best, right? Anyway.
Well, thanks so much for, bringing our attention to that. This is important analysis, and how do we help a highly mentally abused public in a propaganda minefield to realize real risks to them and to take action. And I think what we're doing right now is certainly a big step on that. And the fact that each of us has different audiences and people that we're able to communicate in that dialect. And I think the cross-pollinating and the coming together, given our time frame, is one big element of that. We've got some more questions, and I wonder. I'm gonna go to the next question from someone who hasn't asked one yet, and then continue in our process. So Chris Fleck, also of TFM Report, thanks for joining us, and love to hear your comment and question.
Hey, thanks everybody. It's less of a question and more of a comment.
You have a strange,
one of the aspects of this
echo,
bill,
Chris.
the most egregious aspects, is that there is no framework. It is just very loosely put out there with no guidance whatsoever, which means that most egregious aspect of this bill is also our greatest strength. As a proud member of the authentic media, as we're gonna start coining it now, we endeavor to tell the truth. We endeavor to fact check. We endeavor to make sure that our opinions aren't biased. But I think in this particular case, we've got freedom in the sense that this bill has left it open to interpretation. So if we're out there talking about this bill, we can go with whatever we want to on what this bill could potentially do. And that means you can pull the rails off. You don't have to prove that they're going to lock you up in a 15-minute city or they're going to lock you up in a quarantine camp. You can just say, this leaves it open for that interpretation. If that's how I interpret it, it's left open that way. So one of the greatest strengths in this is the fact that the rails have come off and we can just present this bill in whatever way we want. And we don't actually need experience or a hard data set, because they haven't provided that yet. It's open to whoever is going to interpret that down the road. So we can interpret it however we want. And there's a great power in that as you go forward.
That's interesting. I'd like to hear what others at least have to think about that. But yeah, it does seem that this bill says, in case of anything, we can do anything to anything. And yeah, that's wide open. I do want to caution us on one point, which is that sometimes there's frustration with the lag of a large part of the population, because we have to remember there's been a major psychological operation over the last 4 years. Our population has been mentally abused and chemically abused as well. So, but what really is our strength is that we are factual, and that we really go to the information and analysis. And I know sometimes, people say, well, are we preaching to the choir? Well, I think, being integral to our deep understanding of things as they evolve is important. And I think a lot of people are catching up, and the body count of the medical assault that just happened, and we see the plummeting trust of the public in, for instance, their doctors. Unfortunately, with rare exceptions, I'm proud to be one of a group right now on certain subjects. I think we have some good place to move forward. Does anyone want to comment, Lisa, otherwise, on that question before I go to Derek? So thanks again.
I agree.
Yes,
Yeah,
please.
I agree that we if we do that, we're going to also find out what messages resound. Like, what I am surprised about is that how sustained the messaging continues to be in our media. Rebel News has covered this twice. Wayne's covered it more than once. Sorry, I can't share my video right now. And so what it is engaging Canadians. Canadians do suspect something is wrong, and we're pointing the direction to them. We're saying this is what's wrong. And so because we get to say this is the issue, this is where to look, they trust us now. They trust us because we've been right on every conspiracy out there. So throwing a lot of mud out on and seeing what sticks to the wall is kind of maybe what will work and what will come out in terms of what are the successful slogans. But this is being shared around the world. Our videos are being shared around the world. I'm getting, inquiries from the UK to speak. So it's tapping into what people think is going to be next. And I think, if we get a Jordan Peterson or a larger podcast audience, or even a more mainstream podcaster, will get even a new audience that they bring. So we'll see in terms of what sticks, and I do like that approach, because you can say a lot with this bill. Is it going to be agriculture? I really think, are we going to eat bugs to prevent a pandemic? I mean, come on, Canada. At what point do they get to be that stupid?
Thanks very much, Lisa. I think we're going to take a few more questions. At least everyone whose hand is currently up. Maybe we get another 2 if we're pointed, because we're getting close to our set. Will be 2 hours since the onset of this press conference. Derek Noonan, would you please take the mic?
Sure. My last question, again for Laura Lisa. It was a topic, actually, we were a few topics ago, but I wanted to chime in. But you mentioned the legal team and looking at MPPs and everything on a provincial level. Do you think we have the ability, also considering the last lockdowns and mandates that we had, that the attorney generals did not follow due process in putting those mandates on? And is there anything that we can enlighten legally going down that avenue?
In respect of the attorneys general, I don't have a specific comment with respect to that. I knew that we had existing emergency plans that were sufficient to deal with emergencies, and we didn't use them. We displaced them. And so one of the things that I think is effective in the messaging for this one is, what we did at COVID? That thing that we did? That was without this legislation. That was without this grant of power. And they could already do that. Did you like that? You didn't. You really don't. You really, really don't like this. And then the other thing is there's still a fair amount of patriotism where we dip into the fact that this is actually a coup on Canada, where we no longer have the potential to govern.
Mm-hmm.
We no longer have the potential. We don't have the separation of powers. We don't have the division of powers. We don't have the protections of the charter. We don't have anything that Canada historically has if this goes through. So it's bye-bye Canada. So, maybe are we ready for bye-bye Canada? As simple as that. Are we ready to say goodbye to Canada through this bill? And Dr. Sam Dubé says, no, we're not. Yeah, I saw him shake his hand. We're not going to say goodbye to Canada. And so, maybe that takes the people watching the hockey game and go, yeah, well, no, I'm not going to say goodbye to Canada. And hi, Teresa Tam. Yeah, we need a legal team. We need a marketing team. We need to take it next level. But people still want more information about this bill. Everywhere I see in my inbox now, places where I've never talked about it are talking about it.
Thank you very much, Lisa and Derek. Wayne Peters.
A couple of things that I've come to understand perhaps a little bit better throughout this conversation even as well. But Dr. Hodgkinson said it right from the beginning, that this was the greatest assault on an unsuspecting and innocent society in the history of humanity. I would further that to say that this was the biggest act of terrorism on innocent and unsuspecting societies. And what did they learn? If you listen to Climate Barbie, she says that once you have your talking points, even if it's a lie, you scream them, get them down pat, scream them loud enough and long enough, and they become the truth. That is what they learned. That is what they loved. And as you correctly stated, they were able to do so much. This bill is an extension of that terrorism. Since when does climate become an existential crisis on the level of medicine and health and pandemic? So this hybrid adoption of these two radically opposing theories being merged into one is the mechanism that they want to continue their assault on Canada with. And I think there's a couple of terms that really will help people understand and digest this that are, the deer in the headlight. And I think there's this mystification and demystifying it is part of the process. I agree, Lisa. And understanding when people hear this gobbledygook and they hear the term stakeholder, they think they're referring to the citizens that the government represents. And that is absolutely not the case. The stakeholder is the public-private partnership arranged with said entities. And we still have have yet to get through that stigma of understanding that the stakeholders are the corporations. They are the fascism, and the policies such as this, representing the stakeholder, that is not representing us, the individual, the human, the person. What the person gets out of this is the tokenization that's tagged like a deer. Every blade of grass of consumption is not they're not concerned about our misuse of that blade of grass. That is the data point, the tokenization of the money and the profit for the corporation, whichever corporation that might affect under the public-private partnership. So this control economy is literally fascism, to support these public-private partnerships and control our expense that's cutting into their profits is how they see this. So this data-driven society, this social credit system is not meant to keep us in line. It is meant and implemented to keep the profits flowing for the public-private partnerships and to cull the bad expenses, i.e. us, that don't comply and resonate with their agenda. So I don't know if any of that helps for me, I have to dumb it down in order to digest it and regurgitate it in anything that makes sense. But that is the point and purpose. This bill is an extension of terrorism, specifically designed to be arbitrary so that they can assault us for any method that threatens the public-private partnership corporate that is the actual participant that they are referring to in that bill and law. It is not we the people that are the participants. It is whatever agency is in partnership with the command and control structure. So that's kind of my takeaway from all of this. Hope that helps.
Thanks very much, Wayne. That's very clear. And I don't find it dumbed down. It's just in language that we can, from all our different trades, understand. Jody Ledger, would you be so kind as to probably our last question for this press conference?
Okay, so neither one of these statements I'm going to make are my own. Chris just sent me this little thing. The difference between Hamas, the Taliban, and our government is that our terrorists come with a marketing department, our government marketing department. But the question I actually have is something that Ed Jamnisek and myself were discussing, and Ed Jamnisek is from the Freedom Report. And Lisa, we were in a conference with you, I believe it was earlier in the week or last week, and Ed had asked a question, and I don't know if you saw it or heard it. And so I sent you a message on it, and I didn't get a response. So I'm going to ask you again. And this was originally Ed Jamnisek's question, so I can't take credit for it. But he wanted to know, as a lawyer, understanding the law, understanding the different legal remedies we may or may not have, is it possible to file for an injunction to stop this bill from going through or even being considered by the senators based on the egregious acts of going against our Constitution, our Canadian Bill of Rights, and the numerous legislation that is out there that is supposed to protect Canadians' privacies?
All of my analysis has been a first principled analysis as a concerned citizen that, comes with the years of experience as a lawyer that I've had. So I've had 24 years of a lawyer. But to investigate a specific question of law, I would have to sit down and devote many, many hours to it. What I can tell you is that the Constitution is set up so that the premiers right now, they can go to court right now and stop this bill. We have how many premiers? Can Scott Moe do this right in Saskatchewan? Can Danielle Smith do this? Right? So it doesn't matter which premier goes up, then the others can join. So right now, this can be stopped with a premier. A premier with courage can go and stop this. And so if they understand the agenda and they get this, they can go and stop this. In terms of individual rights, normally, my concern is normally you have to have a fact pattern that shows your rights are infringed. You have to wait till the statute does what it does. And my worry about that is that because it's with the WHO, they're going to use these powers as they declare they're fake. And when that comes, your interpretation, they say with Section 1, well, that's a reasonable infringement on your rights because this is an emergency situation. So what you're doing is you're gaming the system. So in my view, what we'd have is a very novel case that we're saying, you are terminating Canada. You're terminating Canada. You're terminating Canada with a bill, and I need a remedy. I need a remedy. My right to be a citizen in Canada. You're attacking my right to be a citizen. You're separating me from the benefits of my citizenship. You're separating me from my constitution. You're separating me from every right I have under the charter and every freedom. And therefore, I need a remedy. So even if it's novel, even if we haven't encountered this before, when I went to law school, the Constitution is a living tree. What that means, if I establish that I have a right under the Constitution, I need a remedy. Now give it to me. Give it to me. I want my remedy. But my analysis is if something terminates Canada, how can it be something that isn't void? Or how can it be something that isn't treason? A contract, legislation is a type of contract, right? So a contract to terminate the country should be an invalid contract ab initio. Just like if Bonnie and I had a contract to terminate the life of Wayne Peters, and we would never do that. Wayne, we love you. We love you. Bonnie could say, Lisa didn't perform the contract. I'm going to court, right? That's an invalid contract. And so we have to expand our analysis and use it almost by analogy. What are the analogous circumstances that grant us legal rights? But I would say normally, your rights first have to have been infringed in order to get to court. And by then, I'm afraid it's too late. So by then, they're going to have their pandemic, their very scary pandemic. And for those who think that the climate change connection, well, it's not very real. It is very real. They do try to put climate change as front and center for preventing pandemic. And this is their one sentence I want, you guys to leave with. This is Harvard, and this is public health at Harvard. As the planet heats up, animals big and small on land and sea are headed to the poles to get out of the heat. That means animals are coming into contact with other animals they normally wouldn't. That creates an opportunity for pathogens to get into new hosts. Many of the root causes of climate change also increase the risk of pandemics. So really, and I can drop that in the chat, it's not far afield. The climate emergency, the grabbing of your land because of climate, the 15-minute cities because of climate. That's all involved in this bill. And that's how they connect it. You have to stop the pandemic from the animals running north.
Well, thanks very much, Lisa. I guess if millions of dollars of taxpayers' money funneled illegally into gain of function research to create viral bioweapons, if that ever fails to produce something, they can always wait for a sunny day in the north to chase a polar bear into a squirrel and tick the whole thing off.
Gotta be it.
With this
Well-
bill, they won't have to wait. That's their point. They can make it up as they go.
Yeah. Well, this has been an excellent press conference, folks. Wherever you're watching this, whatever platform, we intend, along with this video, to have links to things we've spoken about, to have links for each of the authentic journalists involved in this press conference. Right now at WCHCanada.news, you can find very actionable steps that you can take regarding Bill C-293 and regarding the UN Summit of the Future, both urgent issues for Canadians. Along with the duty of chairing this, I guess I get to make a concluding thought or two. And as a legally lay person, it seems very clear to me, especially after the last 4 years, that we have hostile foreign entities, which would include the UN, the WHO, and the WEF. It is clear that they have agents operating within high offices of both government and industry in Canada and elsewhere. And the list of crimes committed by these persons, in my opinion, includes everything from malfeasance to negligence to coercing of medical assault. And at this point, treason and really premeditated mass murder when you look that they're still pushing these injections, for instance. So in addition to a political problem, we're definitely dealing with a criminal issue. I think we're in a situation that's urgent. I think that we have to take action now, some of the actions we just mentioned. But as our Chinese wisdom has shown us, death by 1,000 cuts is sometimes the path to victory. And I recommend everybody taking in this press conference, watching the authentic journalists live streaming this and sharing this. Take action. Do take the actions at WCHCanada.news, but get creative. We do need to restore the rule of law. These treasonous actions are completely unacceptable, and we need to stop them in every way and with full intensity. Thank you, everyone, for attending. God bless Canada and the world, and have a great day.
And there you have it, folks. Such great chat throughout all of this. Awesome to have everybody participating. This was kind of, I guess, this was an advanced screening. Nobody streamed this live. It will be going out tomorrow on World Council for Health Canada.news, as well as probably Dr. Trotsy and multitudes of streams and platforms by the participants that took part in all of this today. So look for this stuff, guys. And so the idea is to build something, and the hashtag ScrapC293 is something that helps create on the multiple platforms. It helps create a search engine. So when you go into the search on the platforms, you can literally find all the updated information. And the point of this is to start something that doesn't stop, even though the Senate might do what they're going to do. We have mountains of growing evidence that of the corruption, and that too will come to a head at some point. This is where we get something that makes it undeniable that right now this is something that we seriously need to unite to stop. This is the existential crisis. The fact that they are ramming this through the Senate is again further evidence of the treason and the corruption and all of these things that are all, this is for when you put on the oppressor's shoes, for lack of a better term, this is their last Hail Mary to wrap up all of the things that they need to do that they learned through the trial run of the C-19 pandemic measures. And now everything that they did through those lockdowns, through this bill, they're self-justifying themselves. Anything that they can possibly dream up as a justification to implement whatever measure is required for to satisfy the public-private partnership behind whatever agency needs to take the control of whatever crisis that they dream up. So that is in um, as deep of an analysis as we can, really do right now. And I look forward to this whole uh, thing becoming, the water cooler talk of everything. This needs to be as significant a discussion as Springfield, Ohio, in Canada, particularly. So, regardless of what the Senate does, Senate's going to do what Senate's going to do. At the end of the day, sooner or later, it's all only going to matter what we, the people, do. So this distraction of election charade that's been going on is merely that, a distraction to keep us focused from the things that are, uh, you know, the top priority. And we can talk about this. There's a question here. I'll answer questions if I see a question mark behind them and it's something that I can touch on. Do you think it will be signed? So here's the deal right now. As of this moment in time, it's gone through another reading in the Senate. It's I think up for another one tomorrow. Regardless, Senate's going to do what Senate's going to do. The point is that all of the members of Parliament, the ones that we put to the faces of so-called democracy in Canada, have let it go past them. So it's not in their jurisdiction anymore unless we make it so. Right. So even if they pass it, it would take some time to go through royal ascension and some of the other steps along the way. So we've got a little bit of time to unite around this. If Canadians can unite around one form of a demand of negotiation that doesn't get thrown out as being ultra radical, far right wing, racist, misogynist, homophobic, whatever the case might be, which this bill provides us endless opportunity to find fault with this. So the MPs thought they could slide it through. It didn't happen. We're on to them. And regardless, at the end of the day, here's the thing about laws. Small groups of people dream them up, put them on paper, then they agree upon them, and then they agree to enforce upon these rules. And through implied consent, they become laws, and we abide by them. At any point in time, when the court of public opinion adjourns to say no in significant force and effect through the proper channels and means, those laws can be rescinded at any stage of the government. So this is where we need the united effort in a civil fashion to put out this fire immediately. And here's the reason why I think that this one is so important, because this one has the opportunity to show us what Canada is really made of again. This one is, on a magnitude of 10, the cause of the what's triggered the initial lockdown mandates. This is 1,000 reasons for more lockdown mandates if this becomes law through the next steps of the process. So if the initial lockdown mandates weren't bad enough for you, imagine what happens when an elephant sneezes on the North Pole. right? So that's the point of this. If we can't unite on this singular cause and purpose and force every single elected official to be addressing this, we do that incessantly through some of the mechanisms that we provided here and started here to to introduce you here today. These are preformed letters, guys. These are preformed. um, I'll pull some of both of these sites up for you guys and show you what this is about. um, just give me a second here, guys. Okay. Now we brought this up, or they brought this up. Dr. Trotsky, or I believe, brought this up, which is one of the two tools. This is where we start. This is just a start, and here's why this is a good start. Because off of not this one, but the other letter, this one here, I know that we got 43,000 emails sent to the senators in one afternoon. What can we really do? Now, the interesting thing about this stuff, guys, is it really is super simple. You fill in the blanks, and it will tell you based on your postal code and city who this should be addressed to. Um, I'm just going to skip through that so we can. Hopefully nobody catches that. But anyway, this tells me who my elected senators are, and it gives you a pre-written letter that you can just put it. You can just send it out and submit it, done in 30 seconds, or you can edit it and make it your own. Make it specific. And one of the things that I've come to learn over the last few weeks is that if you don't, and this really burns me, but if you don't use the appropriate parliamentary language, that's the first filter. That's the first thing that sends it to the trash bin. And what do I mean by that? Is if you don't use words like whatever their title might be, right honorable, yada, 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 if you don't address your communication with the right the right honorable, then it's already file 13, gone. So you have to address it appropriately per their position, not that hard to do, and you have to request an official response in the same appropriate language. Um, Letter mail still mortifies them, and it's other than the cost of your paper, envelopes, and time, no stamps are required. And there is nothing that mortifies them more than showing up to the office and there is 5 mail bags full of appropriately written letters that they are compelled to respond to, or else they get addressed within the parliament as failing their constituents. So there's some rules to this game that we can leverage. And this is what we're hoping to begin the process of through so many of the authentic media contributors that are trusted across Canada taking part in that today. So you're going to see a whole lot of people talking about some of these kinds of things. And right now is the time to do this, because right now they think that they're convincing us to put their butts back in those same seats again, right? Well, maybe they have a surprise coming. Maybe we have to tell them in no uncertain terms that perhaps the non-confidence vote isn't just about carbon taxes, Mr. Pierre Polyev. It's about what the hell are we doing to stop this bill and this insanity. This is the stuff that we need to be forcing this election upon, and every single one of these parties and these members of parliament. And these preformed letters are a really great way. And this is 2 of them: stand for health freedom. Use them, burn them down, use them up daily. Right? There's that all it does is take a little bit of your time. right? And convert them to print, put them in an envelope, start firing them off, no stamps required, right? So this is, you know, if people understand the gravity, they came to Ottawa in February in Canada of all times to manifest the greatest demonstration and public expression of peace, love, and faith in their country and democracy. That was that was a that was a test run, guys. That was a test run of what they're planning to do. And so while we still can, before C-63 comes up next, right behind Bill C-293 abomination, we, the people, have to take control of the narrative, the discussion, and what the priorities are. That's on us. They're not making it easy. Nobody's going to make it easy for us to unite. That's that's not, they're not interested in that. So this is going to take some work for us. This is a great place to start. This press conference was phenomenal in providing everybody exactly what you need to know to go forth and resist peacefully within the means. And there's a lot more that's going to come out of this over the next coming days and weeks. So sorry, I'm probably missing some comments and questions here. I said I'd answer some questions. Um, Yeah, if we don't, we can kiss everything goodbye. If we don't, can't find one thing to agree upon, we will, Canada will end with us squabbling over a bazillion other things that they have manufactured for us to fight about. Uh, Scrap C-293, that's where I'm starting with this. Absolutely. Yeah, scrap Bill C-293. The closer we can get to a consensus on using that, the better. Many thanks to everybody that spoke tonight. This is the beginning of something beautiful. I think I'm very inspired by this. This is just the beginning. Um, if you weren't here at the beginning, I talked about another event looking forwards to that's starting to come together. Look for a 24-hour worldwide simul-stream event, guys. This is something that we're getting to take part in, coming up for, I think, November 1st. But, you know, sorry, I have missed so many comments. I don't see a whole lot of questions here, guys. I don't want to make this too long with me just babbling away at the end of all of this. This was already 2.5 hours. Wow. I hope you guys have got a lot out of this. That is, again, one of the locations. 100% is more than axe the tax. This is a far bigger issue than just axe the tax. Axe the tax is a distraction, but it's up to us whether we take the bait or we force them to address the uncomfortable conversations. So that's what this is us trying to start bringing our country together under one synchronistic understanding of the greatest existential threat, and this kind of arbitrary legislation should be enough to say, whoa, 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 wait a minute, we're not having this, and you're uh, we have an ability to make that kind of influence right now while they're paying attention, thinking that they might get a seat of their own. On Monday, guys, I've got Peter McIsaac coming on. Wow, this guy is going to melt your brains. It's going to be a drink from the fire hose again. Um, 24 years of security and intel, and this guy is like a one man's force of nature. Very wise, with an incredibly interesting program that they're developing over in Nova Scotia. I think it carries a lot of weight is, once we can find some things to come together on and get moving in the same direction, and we get to introduce new and more and effective ideas and people that are doing brilliant work. So Peter McIsaac is coming on Monday, and I think so far we've got the White Rabbit podcast from Australia coming on Wednesday. That's going to be super huge. What else I got? A couple of regular scheduled maintenance things, guys. Again, I hope you find value in what we do. Make sure you double check your notifications and your subscriptions. Get all of the extras free at Substack. Take part in both of these bills, all of these links. Most of the people involved in that conversation, to that press conference, I will have links to get plugged into the efforts that they're doing. If you want to help me and buy me a coffee, there is going to be links in my Substack to do that as well. It's my life support system. Contrary to popular belief on some people's part, even if I don't get to it right away, that is the best way to reach me. Because honestly, guys, I get tens of thousands of communications a week, and it is literally a one-man army. And I struggle most of the time to try to keep up, but I do the best I can. That is the way to do it. And I'm, a lot of the people that you guys saw in that press conference are in the same situation, but this again gives us something to work towards collectively. We're working anyways, so this we're doing something anyways, so this is something that we can all do together, and that's the underlying message of everybody. So whether it's me or Shadow or Dr. Trotsy or Chris and Jody at TFM Report, there so many of these people are the unsung shoulders, the unsung giants that so much of the people in Canada depend on in these battles and fights. So support them all. The ones that you trust, support them. There's so many things out there screaming and clamoring for your money. Support the people that are working as hard as the ones in that. It ended up being a 3-hour meeting. So a lot afterwards. This was a multiple time thing. So these people are committing a lot of time and work into this. So support them, support whoever it is that you trust and go to every single day. If you want to help me, this is the best way to do it. That donate at whatsupcanada.org is where less comes off the top for the big guys. God bless. The PayPals and the buy me a coffees, but they take more than what a direct donation does. So that's the best way to do that. If you want to help me keep doing these kinds of things and keeping it free for everybody else out there, the other alternative is for I think it's 50 cents a show. You can subscribe for $8 a month on Substack voluntarily. Nothing is ever behind a paywall. That is the end of all of my babbling and ranting, and I think the paramount fight of our day and time, and we're just getting started. So I'm looking forward to what we can do as a country again. Now is the time to bring it together again. And I think we have a great opportunity brewing here, thanks to the tireless efforts of some of the warriors that you guys got introduced to tonight, and we'll get plugged into tomorrow and carry on. Tally-o. Tomorrow here is Bankers Bandit, Bullion, and Buck with Bryce. Again, regular Friday programming. And again, big stuff next week. I love you guys all. What do I got? What am I going to go out with here? It's late. We only have a couple of partners with this program. Tomorrow is Newell Precious Metals with Bryce, and tonight I'm going to play you out with one of our other partners. Another one of the unsung. And if there's companies that you want to work with that are they might be big companies, but they're still doing things for, the right reasons. This is one of them. There's a lot more to this other than just an outro play out, but connect with, take some time when you're just sitting with a coffee and you don't have anything to do. Scroll the Patriot Switch page on the whatsupcanada.org website, and don't be shy to ask some questions about whatever you might see in this last minute, because there's some really great people that we work with, and if nothing else, it's a great conversation with some more new friends and patriots. All right. So I love you all. See you same time, same place, 7 p.m. Eastern time tomorrow. God bless. Stay mighty, my fellow patriots, warriors, prisoners, and hostages. We got this.